So after my mum passed away, we had a very complicated family situation, as I think a lot of families get in that time. But obviously, we didn't have much of a relationship with our dad growing up. My dad, through no fault of his own, suffered through quite a lot of mental health issues and therefore wasn't able to be there for us throughout our childhood, nor when anything like this happened. So we moved in with our uncle and auntie, which is where we became incredibly close with our two cousins. And I think I always look back at that time, and I think it's a very different story and a very different sort of narrative of my life. But I think about that time as a bit of a blur. I still was processing everything that was going on. As I previously mentioned, I think I had very much undiagnosed ADHD, OCD, and I was I was told, at least throughout my childhood, that I was a very angry young boy. And I think moving in with an uncle that we didn't have the best relationship growing up wasn't the best thing for us. Whilst it kept us together, it wasn't the best thing that could have happened. My uncle kicked me out at just shy of a year of living with him, and picked me up one day after school with all of my stuff in bin bags in the back of his car, and was like, "Do you know where you're going?" And I said, "No." He was like, "Well, I'm dropping you off at your dad's." And that was separating me from my brother, my sister, my two cousins, separating me from a life of comfortability and everything that I kind of knew again, and dropped me off with effectively a stranger who I didn't really know. That was quite a tricky thing because, again, I was a 12-year-old, 13-year-old at that time maybe, grieving in the first place and still not having a clue of community or having a clue of who I needed to be at that time. I didn't have a clue of how to process my emotions. I'd had a couple of counselling sessions by that point, but I still felt lost and thrust into a position where I just didn't know what to do. There's a saying that it gets easier with time, and that you are able to move on, I think, with grief. And I don't disbelieve the "it gets easier with time" bit. I just think it's worded wrong. I don't think it necessarily gets easier. I just think you know how to process things a lot better. I think you go through a series of firsts with everything in grief. You go through the first birthday, you go through the first anniversary, the first Christmas, the first time you have to go to the doctors, the first time, everything that you experience again without that person in your life, especially when it's someone as close to your parent. And I think that the older that you get, I've had way more birthdays now without my mum than I had with her. And I think that first, but the birthday that is a bit of a shocking one is the one where you realise that moment's happened. So it must have been about my 25th birthday, and you go, oh, okay, I've had more birthdays without my mum here than I did with her. And I think that gets that's when it tips into another level, because you're then every year now that gets added onto that, it's just like one further and further away. So so my mum's anniversary, my mum's birthday, and Mother's Day, for me, are usually all in around the same week. So it's a it's a time of the year where I always get very reflective, and I also get very I get very reflective, and I think about everything that she's missed out on since.